Probably go 4 or 5 before.
Good evening. Welcome to the November 11th, 2019 Aiken City Council meeting. To our veterans, we want to say Happy Veterans Day.
Amen.
We appreciate your service. This time we're going to have invocation, which will be followed by the pledge, which will be led by Chief Branco. If you're inclined, please feel free to rise with us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. In particular today, we remember our veterans and we thank you for them, for their service, so that we have the freedom to gather here tonight, Lord. We thank you for all the freedoms that we enjoy at their cost and their sacrifice. Father, we pray that you would especially let them know that as we are a city of character, today we come with gratefulness and thankfulness in our hearts for their service. We ask that your blessings would be upon this meeting, that everything that is said and done would be pleasing to you. We ask for wisdom upon this council, Lord, that everything that we would do would be in your honor. As in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Good evening, Chief.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to read the guidelines for our city council meetings. Meetings are public forums in which many opinions are expressed and the business of the city must be conducted. As such, disciplined, honorable, and professional decorum is paramount. Courteous and respectful communication is expected. During public hearing, all questions and statements from the public shall be directed to the chair. If you wish to speak, raise your hand and I will certainly recognize you. Please approach the podium and state your name and address. In order to allow an opportunity for everyone who wishes to address council, speakers should limit their comments to the subject being discussed. Each speaker will be given 5 minutes to address an issue and may only address an issue once unless questions from council are posed to the speaker. And I'd like to recognize our Mayor Pro Tem at this time, Ms. Gail Diggs, for additions and deletions to the agenda. Ms. Diggs.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. There are no additions or deletions to the agenda. So with that in mind, I make a motion that we accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Councilman DeWar. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as presented, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. The minutes were passed out to council for their review before our meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Sorry.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Today under presentations, most appropriate, we have a Veterans Day presentation by the Aiken County Veterans Council. And I'd like to ask their representatives to come up at this time. Good evening, Mr. Colbert.
Good evening, sir. As usual, thank you for allowing me to come speak in front of you all this evening. And I want to make that readily apparent before I start discussing what I'm here to discuss. You guys have been a huge help to the Aiken County Veterans Council and the veterans, some of which that are seated behind me, not just throughout this past year, but during the length of your terms in the positions that you currently hold. Our country was attacked on September 11th, 2001. That changed the world as we know it. I have personally been deployed for at least 6 months of each year for the last 18 years. I tell you this for 2 reasons. Number 1, we very much are still a nation at war. And number 2, I can speak that war far better than most. Some things to think about. Someone just pulled the trigger for the first time in combat, forever changing their life. Someone just lost their best friend in war. Thousands of veterans woke up this morning missing extremities from combat. A minimum of 22 veterans will unfortunately take their life today through suicide. Someone just signed divorce papers because they've been gone far too long. Someone just self-medicated to try to cope with the past that haunts them. and I know this one very well myself. Today, those in harm's way watched us back home celebrate as they prepared to hit a target tonight. I stand before you tonight on Veterans Day in two capacities. As I said, one as a combat veteran, and second, as the chairman of the Aiken County Veterans Council. Tonight I have the honor to not only represent the 15,000 plus veterans that call Aiken County home, I get to carry the torch on their behalf. As you are all very aware, today is Veterans Day, as I saw most of you at the Veterans Day ceremony this afternoon or this morning here in Aiken. Today we stop so to honor the service of those who have served this country faithfully. But today isn't just any Veterans Day. If you do the math, World War I ended in 1918, and the following year folks got together to honor the end of that conflict on 11/11 at 11 a.m. So today, this very day at 11 a.m. at 11/11 marks the 100th anniversary of what we now celebrate as Veterans Day. And that is why I stand before you today. Now, I know two of you have worn the uniform yourselves, Mr. Smith, Mr. DeWar. Thank you both for your service. Ms. Diggs, I have had the pleasure over the years of serving beside you in the capacity of putting on a Memorial Day parade for this city, one of only 3 cities in the state of South Carolina that does so. Mayor Osborne, your uncle, is being honored right now as we speak on Lawrence Avenue in our Hometown Heroes banner program. Ms. Gregory, I know that your family is a very proud, combat-tested family of service, one of which was wounded in combat, no less. And all of you others that I don't know as well as I know these few, I know that you come from proud, possibly proud families as well that of dedicated service to this country. And so why am I here tonight? I'm here because, as I said, some of you I know well, as I just attested to your service and the things that you've done for this community and for our veterans. And as I started this speech, I said that each and one of you has been very important to the council as we've moved forward to champion programs and projects for veterans of Aiken County. But as I said, I represent 15,000 veterans that call Aiken County home, and unfortunately not every single one of them knows all of you as well as I do. They don't know what's in your heart and what's in your head. And on the 100th anniversary of what is now Veterans Day, we're having a city council meeting. And to some, that may be seen as disrespectful. And so I hope that next year when the budget comes out and you guys plan your days and your vacations, that you just think about that perspective. Because not only today do we honor all of you, or all of the veterans, however, we honor all of you as well, those of you that came from a military family. And I can tell you, as someone that's been to war more times than I care to, it is that brings us home. It's our family, our community, our friends that we think of, that we take with us, and that's what gets us home. That's what keeps us safe, is that thought of what's going on back home, what we're fighting for, and that's why we do what we do. That's why the men and women of this country, somebody probably enlisted today, raised their right hand and swore an oath. And defending the Constitution of the United States is not an easy job. Not just anybody can do it. So I ask that, again, next year when you guys plan your calendar, that you just think about that. That we are one very dedicated veteran community, and today isn't just about the veterans, as I said. It's about all of you as well. It's about the folks that support those veterans, the families that are there for them when they leave and there for them when they come back. And I can tell you, as a gentleman who boards a plane in 12 days to go back across the pond, I will take every one of you with me. So, thank you.
Colton, appreciate it. Yes, sir. DeWar.
I'd also like to recognize in the audience a person who's recently given up the position as chairman of the South Carolina State Military Officers Association of America, Colonel David Lobb. David, if you'd stand up. Colonel Lobb has represented that organization, I think, for the last 4 years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask, I know we have Mr. Johnson, who's a Korean War veteran also. Would all of our veterans please stand so we could recognize you at this time? We say it too many times and maybe just too quickly, but let me say on behalf of the city, thank you for your service. We are a community, as Lowell State is a heavy number of veterans within this area, and there's no question it's the characteristics that we talk about so much from wearing the uniform that carry on and make those words on those character banners a reality. So thank you sincerely from the city. And we will check our calendar next year, Lowell. Thank you for that. We're going to move down at this time to old business. First item is approval of appointments and discussion of appointees to various city boards, commissions, and committees. And I will recognize our city manager, Mr. Stuart Beedenbow. Stuart?
Thank you. We have several appointments for consideration. First, John Carmen to the Energy and Environmental Committee to replace Ron De La Mora for a term that would expire December 31st, 2021. This appointment is being recommended by Councilman Thaddeus, and also with Councilman DeWar retiring off of council later this month. We need a replacement, a council representative on the South Carolina Arts Policy Subcommittee.
Stuart, will that be voted on today, or will it be nominated today and on a vote for the
For
next
this,
meeting?
I think you can nominate and vote today.
Okay. Well, I would like to entertain a nomination for Councilwoman Andrea Gregory to serve on that. She's filled in when Dick or I have not been able to make those meetings and has expressed an interest to serve on it. So if there is a motion at this time.
Second.
Okay. Do we need a motion and a second
Yes.
on that, Council? Yes. So would that be a motion?
Motion, yes.
And Councilman Dewar, the second. All right. Any other considerations at this time? Stuart?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. No, what we have tonight is John Carmen to the Energy and Environmental Committee and the appointment of Councilwoman Gregory to represent the city on the South Carolina Arts Policy Subcommittee.
Very good. All those in favor?
John's here, so I thought we'd just get John to stand up and wave to the crowd, at least of who John is. Thank you, John. We appreciate you.
Thank you again, John, for serving.
All right, all those in favor of the nominees for the boards and for the South Carolina Art Study, please raise your hand.
I guess I vote for John.
And
Mr.
Carmen. That's unanimous with Councilwoman Gregory abstaining on the vote for herself.
You can vote for yourself. You can vote for yourself.
You can vote for yourself.
Oh, okay. I just want to say something real quick regarding the E&E committee. I think I've spoken to a few of the members on that committee, and you know, I feel that as a city, we're committed to pushing them along. Earth Day to us is very important, and I know all the work that goes into it, and we want to make sure that that stays on the books. And I appreciate each and every volunteer on that committee, because without you guys, none of the initiatives that have been set forth could ever happen, specifically Earth Day. So I appreciate Mr. Carmen stepping up for this role.
Thank you very much.
And while we're at it, I'll recognize Ron De La Mora, who's here. John's taking Ron's place. Ron, you can stand up and wave too. I've learned more about E&E from Ron than anybody else. So.
Ron, thank you for your service. All right, moving down old business. Item number 2, this is a...
Nominations for the, I'm I'm sorry.
You're exactly right. Are there any other nominations to be considered at our next meeting? Okay. Thank you.
Well, I do have one.
You do? Okay. Councilwoman Diggs?
Amy Hanna from Council on Aging for the Senior Commission.
Aiken Senior Life Services.
Yes, I keep
Very
forgetting.
good. All right. Any other? I think that's all. Thank you. We're moving down old business to item number 2 at this time. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending section 22-4 of the Aiken City Code regarding the discharge of firearms or other weapons by title and an ordinance amending section 22-4 of the Aiken City Code regarding the discharge of firearms and other weapons. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Comments from staff?
Yes, we do, before I get into comments, I want to note Councilman Waltz had brought to our attention paragraph 8 in the memo that talks about the permittees contractors shall use American Medical Veterinary Association targeting guidance to assure humane depopulation. That, I think, language should be removed from any consideration by the group this evening.
Okay.
Let me add something to it. It's the American Veterinary Medical Association of it. And it's not the American Medical Veterinary Association. So let's make sure we're doing that. And the other thing I think we need to do is point out that the reason I'm suggesting this is because this depopulation is for an emergency situation like a terrorist attack or the plague or something like that, and has nothing to do with culling. Culling is not a supported process by the American Veterinary Medical Association. They do endorse it if you have a wildlife management plan, but you have to have a wildlife management plan. And from the information I've been able to find out, I mean, I in all candor, I know a veterinarian. And a call was made to the head of, who handles this for the AVMA today, and they did recommend one wildlife management company to do this. But that is all they recommended on. And they do not recommend culling per se. They will oversee it if it's handled by a wildlife management company that they recognize. Their guidelines for those companies are very strict and a lot stricter than I think we've even realized. But this one here is a depopulation, which is only for emergency situations, and we're not in an emergency situation.
Very good. Taken under advisement. So our amendment will remove item number 8.
Yes, the reference to the American Veterinary Medical Association's guideline.
Okay.
And so in the event, which part of the new ordinance would basically you have to have a wildlife management plan.
Right.
But I guess we can leave it up to that professional to determine if this should
Correct.
be
The one-
adopted.
There's a company called White Buffalo that is recommended. They do a lot of different things. They do aerial surveillance of the whole area. They do a lot of different things. They have protocols listed for everything. They've been doing it 20 years. They follow the guidelines of the AVMA, which for say a humane shot is a person who can shoot at 100 yards and a 2-inch target 99% of the time.
I'm out. Can't do it.
Not many could, but they do have specific guidelines in there, and I mean, there's a copy of their sharpshooting protocol right there just for that. So I think there's a lot that can be done here. Some of this other stuff that's been put in here by the ad hoc committee can be tightened up, but it's not, I don't think, perfect at this point after learning about this and seeing what others do.
All right. Very good. Comments from staff?
Yes, I do want to just read in for the record a proposed amendment to the city code based on recommendations from the committee that council deemed that we need to set up after the September 9th first reading. The permittee shall pay to the city an application fee as determined by the cost of operation plus administrative costs as determined by the city manager. The permittee shall comply with all requirements set by the city's on-call wildlife manager, for example, justification for permit and wildlife management plan. Number 3, all wildlife management permittees and the applicant must have a minimum amount of liability insurance of $2 million with the city named as an additional insured, and a certificate of insurance shall be provided to the chief of the Department of Public Safety prior to beginning any wildlife management operations. The permittee will use shall use sharpshooters with a minimum of 2 years sharpshooting experience with no safety incidents and possessing a National Rifle Association NRA membership certificate. Marksmanship certificate, thank you. The Nuisance Wildlife Control Operators Association NWCOA Suburban Marksman Firearms Proficiency Certifications, military or ex-law enforcement credentials, shooting competition results, or the equivalent. Number 5, prior to beginning wildlife management operations, the permittee shall identify, quote, safe shooting zones, unquote, in areas with the needed buffer from occupied dwellings. Appropriate methods approved by the on-call certified wildlife manager will be used to attract deer to these safe removal locations. Number 6, shooting will only be from elevated positions, assuring that shots are directed onto the ground and into the ground as a backstop. Number 7, the permittee's contractors shall only use frangible bullets approved by the certified wildlife manager to prevent ricochets. And we deleted the printed number 8, and now paragraph 9 is number 8, the last section. The permittee's contractors shall only conduct shooting operations at times determined by the city's certified wildlife manager using sound suppressed rifles. Safety of residents will be a priority. And again, this is an amendment that is in effect citywide, should it pass this evening, to allow the discharge of firearms for the purposes of wildlife management.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilperson Gregory and Councilperson Price if they'd be willing to amend their motion and second to include the information the city manager just read minus section 8. So
Yes.
the motion
So
and
moved.
second.
Second.
So we're considering at this time the original ordinance with the ad hoc committee's recommendations to it as an amendment, minus the section 8, which was the permittees contractors shall use the American Veterinary Medical Association targeting guidance to assure human depopulation.
Mr. Mayor, Section 5, where it says appropriate methods approved by the on-call certified wildlife manager will be used to attract deer, should that reflect wildlife?
Yes.
Instead of the deer.
In paragraph 5, that needs to be changed
To wildlife.
to wildlife.
And that change is reflected in the motion in the second as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're including all wildlife in this?
It's a wildlife management,
So all wildlife is included?
whatever qualifies under wildlife management, correct. So no, not all wildlife is included, because in some cases, you can't manage all wildlife under these mechanisms. It's only whatever falls into that realm. So it's not just for deer.
So we don't have a list of that?
I mean, we've discussed it as far as what can fall into that realm. I guess what,
We don't have a list, though, of which ones are specifically covered. Like in the deep population one, it lists the different kinds of wildlife.
well, it depends if you're trapping, if you're transporting, if you're culling, there's different methods. In this case, it would be please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
In this case, we're referring to culling, correct?
Correct.
So there's different types of wildlife management, and if we transport, that would be some subset of animals. If we trap and then release, it's another subset of animals. If we cull, it's a different variation of animals.
Okay.
And so with this particular ordinance, if this would be proposed by anybody within the city of Aiken and/or a neighborhood, HOA, whatever the case may be, they are going to have to apply for it and present and justify their case. So if they're saying, hey, I have possums and I want to go and follow this approach, they may not fall in that realm, which in turn the city would deny, or the state would deny it first. But this ordinance covers state stipulations, and then in addition, the city stipulations that we just set forth. But most importantly, the city is going to have a wildlife manager who, in addition to all of these stipulations, is going to expect A, justification plan, and B, a management plan, which is going to have a whole nother gamut of stipulations that will be approved by the city and Chief Barenko.
Very good. And this time we'll open up to comment to the audience. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
I'm Beverly Hunter, and I live at 122 Laurel Oak in Woodside. I have done a lot of social media complaining about this killing that's going to happen, and I think you all have made a foregone decision since you have gone to such extent to change these amendments to be put in. I'm shocked that you sit here talking about killing 200 to 300 deer that we don't even know exist. These people drove down 2 roads and counted the deer and then multiplied that by how many. They never, when they put their survey out, they never told any of the residents what it was going to cost them, the residents, to do this killing, this slaughter. And I wonder how many of those people on the board that started this in Woodside are going to be there to watch it, to watch poor innocent deer that have done nothing. They've eaten a few plants. So what? If we have enough money in our HOA fees to put $30,000, $40,000 out to kill deer, why can't we give the people that have had their vegetation eaten money to replace that instead of killing the deer? I'm appalled. I really am, to sit here and listen to you planning so quietly how to eliminate those deer, like a video game, that these gun-hungry people, even though they're sharpshooters, and I have sharpshooters in my family, but they would never go out and join something like this to kill innocent deer. If they needed the meat, it would be a different story. What are you going to do with the meat?
It's actually, I mean, I'll just answer that since you asked. It's
Pardon?
actually in the state code that if anything killed is processed and given back to local nonprofits.
Yes, but what if they're saying, Woodside Board is saying that these poor deer are starving? How much meat can be on their bones? And they're sickly. Do you want to give sick deer's meat to poor people? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be sued from that if they get some type of a disease from it? Are you going to be sued? Woodside sued? Residents sued? I mean, it just strikes me so awful that you would sit here and plan the killing of these deer that have not hurt you. They have not hurt anyone. As for them jumping out in front of a car, we have had many people that speed, and I have done that in Woodside, which I've catch myself and I slow down. But a lot of these people don't care, and they go hell-bent for leather through those streets. And you can ask a lot of the residents if this is not true, the speeding that we have in Woodside. And we don't have anybody to patrol us or to stop it. But I am just, to have grown people sit up here and talk about killing deer so peacefully and so mathematically. I want proof. I would want proof to know how many deer are actually in Woodside. And I don't see that happening. You cannot go down a street and count 5 deer and say, "Ah, there's 500 deer here." That's crazy. And to kill 200, that's going to cost $25,000, $30,000. Why didn't the board put that in their survey? What it's going to cost? They didn't do that. They didn't say the golf holes were going to get 5 votes. That's asinine. I mean, who would want to do this? If you pass this, I'm really ashamed of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Dale Patrick. I'm a resident of Woodside and a veteran. I know it goes both ways, but I mean, anywhere else in the state of South Carolina, I guess outside of Woodside, there's a hunting season and people kill deer. I think the limit has gone up from 1 or 2 to maybe 5 or 6 or more, just to try to get the population of the deer in check. And I think the same thing is happening in Woodside, except there's no way to get it in check because there's no hunting at all. So for me, I think it makes sense to have the same thing going on there. Excuse me. The same thing going on in Woodside that's going on everywhere else in the state.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If that's my mom, tell her I'm doing great. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Michael Stern. I also live in Woodside.
Yes, sir.
My concern is more with the ordinance than with what Woodside is doing or wants to do.
Yes, sir.
Looking at what the document that was handed out, the agenda item number 2, on number 2 on the second page, the permittee shall comply with all requirements set. I'm sorry, the number 1, permittee shall pay the city an application fee. Who's going to set the fee? Why is it not set out in this document as opposed to letting it be different whenever a Woodside or another organization similar to Woodside wants to do what is being proposed tonight? To me, it would seem that it would be appropriate to set a predetermined fee for the city.
Yes, Mr. Stern, I'll recognize our
I'll
city
wait.
attorney.
Yes, sir, thank you. The fee primarily is comprised of what the on-call wildlife manager is going to charge the city for managing each individual wildlife management episode. And so, as we sit here tonight, we don't know if it's going to be an event that's going to take 2 weeks to work, or is it going to take 6 weeks to work, or is it going to take 8 weeks to work? The longer the event, the more it's going to cost, and so until we know how long the event's going to take, with consulting with the wildlife manager, we don't know. And so that's why it's kind of an open-ended sort of thing. So he's going to let us know what that's going to be, and then once that is known, then we'll be able to figure out what that fee should be.
Should that not be defined within this document?
I mean, that's
I'm sorry?
well, I think that's what I just told you.
Okay, well, I'll buy what you're saying, but to me, it's not very clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Stern, the reason that is also, we felt very strongly that if this passes, the wildlife manager needs to be accountable to city staff.
Oh, I
and
agree
all,
with
as
that.
As opposed to the applicant, whoever it is. So that's why it's written that way.
Who selects the wildlife manager, and who is going to ascertain whether the credentials of such individual or company is appropriate?
That'd be
It's a
the,
question.
That's going to be done by the city.
I'm sorry?
The city will do that.
Again, this document does not say that. It says
The-
there'll
the
be a
city-
wildlife manager. Doesn't say who's going to select them, who's going to approve the
it
qualifications.
says determined by the city manager.
So it's going to be Stewart's job or somebody in his position to ascertain whether it's correct.
We would put out a request for proposals, and they would have requirements for, there need to be certain qualifications for this individual or firm, and we would use standard qualifications in consultation with the Department of Natural Resources and others for this, but we would submit those. We would review the qualifications submitted by the firms interested and then make a selection.
So the city is going to be the entity that selects the wildlife manager?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no different than soliciting proposals for someone to do some engineering work for us or build us a road or something like that.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that for now, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. Appreciate you being here tonight. Any other comments from the audience? Any comments from council?
I'm just going to say, I hope we don't forget this is an ordinance for the whole city, not just Woodside. And we're talking about being able to discharge a gun in the whole city, not just Woodside. And once we step on this path, we're on a pretty slippery slope, then we better think hard about it.
Thank you, Councilman Waltz.
Mr. Mayor, I know during the first reading, I did not vote in favor of it, but I think the ad hoc committee did its due diligence and made some strict regulations and requirements, and that was a game changer for me. So.
I'd like to add, first and foremost, this is not a Woodside ordinance. This is a city ordinance. The ordinance per se has not changed. The discharge of firearms is still prohibited within the city limits. So please, nobody go start shooting their guns in the city limits, because that would not be looked upon favorably. So that has not changed. None of those aspects of this ordinance has changed. What happened was something was added, and we discussed that pretty eloquently. Approving this doesn't automatically. Now I'm going to bring Woodside back in, because at the end of the day, we're here because Woodside brought up this particular issue. But approving this does not approve Woodside's approach to wildlife management yet. This is the first step to opening up an avenue of wildlife management. And Woodside or neighborhood A, B, C, whatever, has to go through each and every facet of the stipulations for the state and the city manager, wildlife management. I mean, there's a lot involved. And it's not a cheap process either. It's a very expensive process, and whoever pursues this approach, there's a lot to do, and it's not cost effective. So please understand that this is a pathway forward to handle scenarios that become issues with wildlife. And yes, a justification plan is one of the many stipulations that whoever is pursuing this avenue has to provide. The wildlife manager will request a justification plan, and at that moment, if all the state stipulations are met, they still have to justify it. So, understand that just because you applied and you can afford it and whatever doesn't mean it's approved. There's a lot involved. So I just wanted to make note of that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gregory.
And thank the ad hoc committee. Just to add, Mayor and some city council members put an ad hoc committee of people for and against this particular ordinance amendment. And we really, really spent a lot of time. We brought in professionals. There was a lot of due diligence. A lot of things were discussed. But at the end of the day, the reason there's a wildlife manager that would have to be brought in is because in addition to the state and city statutes, they're going to have a laundry list of items as well. So I want to thank that ad hoc committee. I want to thank Councilman Jardo, Mayor Osmond for the time that was spent to really do this properly and with all its due diligence.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gregory. Any other comments from the audience?
To add to Councilwoman Gregory's comments, I think it's important to understand, Mrs. Hunter brought it up, of we're approving this issue for Woodside. We're not doing that at all. That is a Woodside issue, and it's up to the members, the owners of the real estate that are in Woodside to decide whether this is the proper channel, which is what we're just talking about. A lot of people don't understand. Woodside could go into the county and do it right now, tomorrow, and do the same thing and wouldn't have to jump through these hoops and wouldn't have to have anything to do with the city, and they own property within the county. Would it be effective? It would certainly not be effective to the north side. We've spent a lot of time working on this. I was against this to begin with, but we've worked through the process of talking about this program, and I think it's a program that works citywide. It's not just for Woodside. Woodside has to determine whether they have a problem. Some people certainly think so. Some people do not, and I've heard from all of you on both sides. I appreciate that. You're very passionate about all of that. But this is a process of a ways of a means to, if there is a problem, to get through it. And it's going to be up to Woodside to have justification going forward through a wildlife manager. And not only that, DNR is going to have to approve it as well, not the city of Aiken.
All right, very good.
I'll just add one more comment. It
Yes, sir.
doesn't matter how we vote on this. It really doesn't. Some people are going to be happy and some are going to be sad. This is not one where you can win on your vote. You're going to upset some people. It's got to be what you think's right. And back to a list of animals. I want to read you the top 3 on the last thing that was added, animals that are considered wildlife. Bovine, lab animals, companion animals, cats and dogs, if they get loose and run wild, they can fall into wildlife. So that's why we need to have a good definition. We've written something that's not been tested. We don't know how well it's going to hold up. But no matter what we vote, it's not going to be the right vote to a lot of people.
If I may, I don't believe DNR is going to give anybody a permit to shoot a dog or a cat. And they got to go through DNR first.
As part of the wildlife management.
Right.
If I might add, I was not present at your first meeting, but my experience comes from working at Savannah Riverside. And if you've ever traveled to Savannah Riverside very early in the morning, this dates me in terms of the years that I've worked out there. And if you've ever traveled, this time leaving work, oftentimes you will encounter, if you're not being safe and mindful of deer crossing, you will run into some deers. And while we'd like to see these deers roam, all it takes is one tragedy, one serious injury. And then you ask yourself, why didn't we do something about this earlier? We're not the only ones that have addressed deer culling. Other states are doing it as well. And if you look at the numbers, there's a high population of deer culling every year taking place. So I do hope that if you're seeing this as paramount as what's been described, we can only take your word as to what's been described, that this will help to relax you some in terms of your travel through in and out of your community, your guests coming into town. I hope that this will remedy some of the problems that you're facing. But there are other communities seeing deer crossings as well. So you're not isolated just in your area, but there are other areas that are concerned as well. So.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman Price. All right, all those in favor of a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Section 22-4 of the Aiken City Code regarding the discharge of firearms or other weapons, please raise your hand. That's Councilwoman Price, Councilwoman Gregory, Councilwoman Diggs, Councilman Duar, Councilman Jardo, and the mayor. All those opposed? Councilman Waltz. And the motion carries. Thank you. Moving down the agenda to item number 3, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to rezone property of Rural Health Services of Second Baptist Church at Teague Street and Columbia Avenue from Limited Professional LP and General Business GB to Planned Institutional PI and approve a concept plan. By title, an ordinance to rezone certain property owned by Rural Health Services, Inc. and Second Baptist Church, Inc. from Limited Professional LP and General Business GB to Planned Institutional PI and to approve a concept plan. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, you might want to pause a little bit and let the room empty out.
Yes, sir.
But so moved.
And I'll second it when he moves it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Jardo, for the motion. Thank you, Councilman Duar, for the second. You're getting in the books a lot for this last active meeting, aren't you?
I'm trying. Just want to let you know I've been here.
Comments from staff?
Thank you. We do have the applicant tonight requesting a rezoning of approximately 11 and a half acres to include the site of the existing Clyburn Center, its offices, and associated parking. The parcels would be combined into one large parcel and rezoned to planned institutional to allow the expansion of future specialty medical offices and required parking. It will eliminate interior parcel lines, allowing them to maximize the property without having to acknowledge setbacks and property lines for 3 different parcels. And it was reviewed by the Planning Commission, the concept plan, and it met all the criteria of the zoning ordinance. And the expansion of the campus will include a 2-story medical office building with office space, meeting space, and storage space, a 2-story building for services and storage, and a specialty medical office building for pediatrics and women's health. The Planning Commission reviewed this at their October 15th meeting and unanimously recommended passage, and it came to council for first reading and passed unanimously with Councilwoman Diggs abstaining and at your October 28th meeting, and it's before you tonight for second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Beanwell. Do we have a timeline for that construction?
We have a representative from the development.
I was just wondering if we had, hey, good evening.
Come forward.
Hey, nice try, but you got to come to the mic.
Mr. Mayor, while she's coming forward, I would like the record to reflect that Ms. Diggs has recused herself from the meeting. She's left the room, and she has handed the city clerk her recusal form.
Thank you, Counselor.
Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening.
As of right now, I'm sorry, Gegina Walker, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Rural Health Services. Do you need my address as well?
We're fine, Ms. Walker.
All right, as of right now, we don't have a plan for start of construction. We are waiting to assess needs and determine whether or not that building is actually needed. So right now, those are just concept plans of what
Great
we may
project.
plan in the future.
Thank you for that. Thanks for all you do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Are there any other comments from the audience? Comments or questions from council? Hearing none, all those in favor? And that's unanimous with Ms. Diggs recusing. So,
How'd you know to come back?
moving down the agenda to item number 4. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance authorizing certain economic development incentives for the old Union Hall building at 227 Park Avenue Southeast to be developed by CT Properties LLC, Inc. By title, an ordinance authorizing certain economic development incentives pursuant to ordinance number 0813-2018 of the City of Aiken Code of Ordinances for a project developed by the CT Properties of Aiken LLC, approving an economic development inducement and incentive agreement and other matters related thereto. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilman Jardo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Waltz. Comments from staff?
Thank you. This parcel is been abandoned for over 5 years or empty on the 200 block of Park Avenue Southeast. The owner wishes to turn the building into 5 apartment units. Between the acquisition cost and development cost, it's about $876,000. It is available for abandoned building tax credits. Since though this is a residential project, our economic incentives ordinance allows for up to 5 years of incentives, but due to the fact it is a residential project, we are recommending just 1 year's worth of incentives since it's not going to be a long-term job creator. So if you approve this at your meeting on October 28th, at first reading, and it is before you tonight for second reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beedenbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Comments or questions from council?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor,
Councilwoman
are we
Price.
paying 1 year of $876,000? What number are we using to?
I'm going to
Pay
ask
with
Tim.
the
Tim has been working very closely with the project owner.
Good evening, Mr. O'Brien.
I'm sorry I missed your question, but I think it included a very large number.
Yeah, I'm wondering what number we're using to pay the
one-
1 year incentive. Is it the
This was,
26?
there are two of them. One was $3,600 and one is $4,000. These are the fees that would be paid for city tap-ons and various things like that, 50% of those, and they're detailed in here. But no, we wanted to make sure to have the total investment number on each one, so we know what's
Okay.
being invested in our community by the private sector. And then, based on that large number, we give them a much smaller number of, in this case, $3,500 to $4,000, 1 year after their certificate of occupancy, so that we know that what they've told us they're going to build is what it was, and that they're functioning under the agreement that we had. And then we rebate to them fees that they've already paid to the city, in each case, right around $3,500 to $4,000.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yep, it was based on the fees and the various costs incurred to the city, and that ended up being a little over $7,200.
And I want to applaud Tim and the city manager on this one for working through the abandoned tax credits. I think it took a little extra effort to get that recognized, so congratulations on that.
It's an exciting project.
Great addition, and right along with our new parks. This is going to be good, have new lights and everything down there. I was involved in the marketing of this property. It needed a lot of work. This is great.
Very good.
We've got several of these, and I'm assuming this is going to apply to the remainder of the ones we're going to discuss next on the agenda, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
It'll be a 1 year only since it's
Okay.
residential, and be several $1,000s as a rebate.
Very good. All those in favor on second reading, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to old business, item number 5. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance authorizing certain economic development incentives for the project on Chesterfield Street to be developed by South Company, Inc. by title and ordinance authorizing certain economic development incentives pursuant to ordinance number 08132018 of the City of Aiken Code of Ordinances for a project developed by the South Company, approving an economic development, inducement, and incentive agreement, and other matters related thereto. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Is there a second?
Second?
Councilwoman Gregory, thank you. Comments from staff?
Thank you. Similar to the first one, this is another residential project in the downtown. This one is on the 100 block of Chesterfield Street South, and it is an investment of about $275,000. The project will be completed by the fall of 2020. And again, like as I just mentioned, we're recommending 1 year's worth of rebates due to the fact that it is a residential project. So again, we're estimating that the total cost of year one of reimbursable items is about $8,500. So the reimbursement should be approximately $4,250. But you heard this at first reading and approved it, and it is before you tonight for second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Beedenbaugh. Any comments from the audience? Comments or questions from council?
Where are they going to park at?
since it is downtown business, I know there is parking along Chesterfield, a number of about 40 spaces, but the site plan, does it have off-street parking? I believe it does not.
Is Ryan here?
Yes, he's in the corner back there. He was nodding his head.
It does, Ryan?
It does not.
It doesn't have parking right at the,
Not
Park
on
at
the
the
site,
site.
no. It's, I think, on the,
Parking is in front as you head south and north.
I know, but they don't
on
have any
Chesterfield.
right at the complex.
I'll be, yeah, I can clarify this. My recollection is that there is on-street parking, so there's about 70 spaces along Chesterfield, but they're also leaving some space behind, so there's going to be a drive between the South Company's building and these two that would go back to the rear, and there's a space back there for some
Behind
parking.
TD Bank or whatever the bank is.
Yeah.
No?
Building.
To the rear of the two
Okay.
units, or the 4 units being built. I think it'd be commonly owned by South Companies, but that was the plan submitted.
Thank you, Mr.
You,
Bland.
Ryan.
All right, all those in favor of second reading on this item, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving now to item number 6 under old business. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance for budget adjustment for emergency repair on Lawrence Street. An ordinance amending the budget of the city of Aiken for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020. Before I ask for a motion, I'm going to ask for clarification from staff, and then I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Biedenbach?
yes, this work is actually almost complete. They're paving this week. The road's already opened back into the main entrance to Hitchcock Woods at Memorial Gate, but we discovered a sinkhole near a stormwater pipe, and due to the critical situation in the location, we viewed it as an emergency, got 3 bids, and the lowest responsible bid was Babcock Construction for $113,110, as it replaced about 300 feet of sanitary sewer pipe along with new manholes, taps, and cleanouts, and the road paving. Funding is available from our water and sewer system depreciation account, and we have before you this budget ordinance to amend the budget to allow for this.
Very good. Thank you, sir. With that, is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman DeWar. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Comments from the audience? Comments from council? Hearing none, all those in favor, second reading, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We move down now to new business on our agenda. Under new business number 1, first reading of an ordinance accepting the FY 2018-19 audit. By title, this is an ordinance accepting the fiscal year 2018-19 audited financial statements and authorizing variances to the fiscal year 2018-19 budget ordinance. We had a presentation in our work session on that. At this time, is there a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Waltz. Comments from staff?
Thank you. We did have, as required by state law, our financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019 audited. And you heard the presentation, as you noted, Mr. Mayor, and we did receive an unqualified opinion with no material weaknesses and no instances of non-compliance material to the financial statements, or in, I guess, layperson's term, a clean audit or clean opinion. And we have before you first reading of an ordinance to accept the fiscal year 2018-19 audited financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Biedenbach. Is there any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I'd like to say a little something.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll keep
Ms.
it
Gregory?
brief. The presentation made was great to hear. I specifically want to resonate the soundness, the financial and fiscal soundness of the city of Aiken. But I also want to take this time to thank staff and recognize Kim, Stewart, and staff who, with your recommendations and guidance and so forth and so on, have put us in a very sound position. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you for making our jobs easy.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well said.
That last part was.
On behalf of staff, thank you.
No? I look at Councilman Dewar because this is usually your moment.
I know, but I usually have a meeting to come back to get the answers to these.
All those in favor of first reading of an ordinance accepting the FY 2018-19 audit, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Going down to item number 2 under new business, this is a first reading and public hearing of an ordinance to authorize an interfund loan for capital project sales tax 4 project of Banks Mill Lift Station and sewer upgrades. By title, an ordinance to authorize an interfund loan for capital project sales tax funds projects. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Councilwoman Gregory made a motion. Councilman Thaddeus with a second. Comments from staff?
Yes, thank you. As part of our project, we're looking at in the area behind the Cracker Barrel, we need to upgrade the sewer lift station, and the money we had allocated from the state revolving fund, we received $1,300,000, which is in the budget. We also have to run a sewer line to the from Banks Mill to Citadel Drive, and we have funds in CPST 4 for sewer line work, and we are asking council to consider an amendment to allow an interfund loan from Capital Projects 4 to do this project. When completed, the sewer capacity at the lift station will go from handling about 400 units to about 1,400 units. So it's a pretty substantial upgrade and will allow for development one day in that area, in that serviced by the Banks Mill lift station. So that area essentially runs from roughly where Toolbeck Road is all the way down to Powder House Road, and down near Citadel Drive where the lift station is.
Very good. Very good. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I thought we still had some water and sewer money in CPST 3, Stuart.
We do. We don't have $800,000. We've got, I think, we've got about $350,000, $370,000 in between the two. If something, if it's up for council's consideration, we could at first reading pass this and present some additional options. I don't believe that money's been encumbered or allocated yet.
I have no objection to borrowing in advance for this project. I just was curious.
Good
Yes,
point.
I'm ready to vote.
We'll present that as an option for council with a staff recommendation, but I believe, given the, I think some of the money was encumbered, and again, we would still need to
Okay.
borrow from CPST 4 for over half of the amount.
Okay.
I'm fine with the proposal as is. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. All right, all those in favor of this item, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 3 under new business, this is a resolution approving the funding and placement of one school resource officer with the Aiken County School District. By title, a resolution authorizing the city of Aiken to provide a school resource officer at Schofield Middle School. Is there a motion?
I so move.
I second.
All right. Councilwoman Diggs made a motion. Councilwoman Gregory made the second. Comments from staff?
Thank you. The South Carolina General Assembly, as part of their fiscal year 1920 budget, proposed and the governor approved additional money for 205 additional school resource officers in South Carolina public schools. The one SRO that is being proposed within the city limits of Aiken is being proposed to be at Schofield Middle School. We would need to partially fund at an annual rate of about $25,555, prorated over one half of the school year. It's about $12,777. So this will be something that in future budgets, if the school district and the city agree, it'll be handled during the budget process. But given that it's a mid-year adjustment, we need to at least have a resolution approving the funding and placement, but due to the fact it is for just half a year, a budget ordinance would not be required. But we do have this with a recommendation from staff for council's consideration that the resolution be approved. And we also have representatives from Public Safety here this evening, and I believe Dr. Foster and Dr. Yarborough from the school district are here as well.
Mr. Beamer, this comes with a recommendation from both Public Safety and the City Manager's Office?
Correct.
Very good. Any comments from the audience? Any comments or questions from council?
These are recurring funds.
Ms. Diggs asked if it was recurring
Yes, they would
funds.
be recurring funds. However, unless the funding mechanism changes, it would be like the others where just it doesn't cover the full cost of an FTE or the certainly outfitting or equipping of a school resource officer. Right now, I think annually it's just shy of $48,000 a year that we get is $47,000 and change per officer.
Do we currently fund 3 or 4?
We have right now an officer at South Aiken, one at Aiken, and one at Aiken Intermediate, and one at the old Pinecrest School, and this would be the 5th one.
The only concern I have is the governor has promised to fund these positions, but obviously he's not. He's only given $47,000 to the school board, and we're saying we need $72,000. That's the cost for an officer. Does a legislative delegation know that there's a shortage of funds? I mean, it's not fair for the governor to say he's giving us something when he isn't.
That's a fair question.
We verbally shared that. I mean, perhaps as part of a letter. I know we in the past have written letters to our delegation supporting or bringing to attention various issues. And if this is something, we could draft a letter for council to sign requesting that as part of the next fiscal year state budget, they consider fully funding.
Well, we ought to at least
Money
let
for
them
the
know,
school
because
resource
it's again one
officers.
of these unfunded mandates which the county, Aiken County gets.
I thought we
Hey,
had
Dr.
discussed
Foster.
this. I thought we had discussed this
Would you
in the
like to-
past
Doc-
about asking for full reimbursement.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, members of the council, just to kind of address the question that you have, keep in mind that the funding for school resource officers is for 9 months. The other 3 months, they are actually serving the community when school's out. So that is the reason for some of the discrepancy in the actual total amount of the funding. So it's really funded for the school system over a 9-month period, not a 12-month period.
I just wonder if that's the way it was presented to the governor.
And to answer Councilman Waltz's question, I think it was discussed sending a letter to the school superintendent, not the delegation.
Okay.
And I think the council as a whole decided to hold off on a letter. But yes, you are correct. That was discussed. We had a good discussion about that during our budget work session back in the spring.
And if we've got 5 resource officers, we're up to about $60,000 unfunded for this issue. We need the school resource officers. I didn't want to touch that issue, but
I'd like to ask Chief if that's okay. Granted, there's that $60,000 discrepancy Councilman Duar is speaking of, but what can you add, Chief, regarding the mechanism of having school resource officers and the impact on whether it's less crime or more management of safety issues and so forth and so on?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. Having an officer at the school mitigates a lot of the response from the patrol officers that, if there was an incident, would have to respond there. So it keeps, at times, it keeps folks free to patrol the rest of the streets of Aiken, or if it's a major incident, of course, we'll have more resources that go there. So I do think there is a value in having a school resource officer at the schools, as discussed with the school district. Funding is always a discussion because of council's concern with the school district, and they've indicated they're happy to address it in their budgeting process. This money actually comes straight from the state. the other funding that we get for school resource officers comes from the school district. So, and we've had those discussions with Dr. Foster already, and he's open as they prepare their budget to look at that as well.
Thank you so much, Chief. And I'd like to add that we have to keep in mind that unfortunately, as the city of Aiken grows, crime is going to grow. It's just one of those proportional things. So it's just something we have to look at. But having this impact, this influence, and these officers present in the schools is that community approach that you and I have discussed many, many times, helps limit and negate certain crimes and or bad behavior at a young age. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. All those in favor of this resolution, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. We move down to that section of our agenda, petitions and requests. Item number 1 is approval of the bid and expenditure of capital project sales tax 3 for painting Chesterfield Street water tank. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman DeWar. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Comments from staff?
Thank you. The water tank at Chesterfield Street is in need of cleaning and painting, and it has been over a dozen years since it was last done. And we have capital project sales tax money, and our vendor is Utility Service Company. Perry George's, I think, already begun, so we need to get the council approval on this project, and they have done similar work for us before, which turned out very well. So we have this approval of CPST 3 money, which is money in hand.
And what was the bid?
$344,400, which is within our budget of $350,000.
Thank you, Mr. Beamer. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 2 under petitions and requests is a request from St. Thaddeus Home and Garden Tour Committee to hang banners in the downtown to promote their garden tour event. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman DeWar. It's kind of self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yes, just banners, April 3rd through the 18th, Whiskey and South Boundary and on Lawrence at Park.
Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Is Lindsay in the audience? Not in the audience.
Okay. We'll move down under information. Anything under issues and updates?
I would like to make one small correction. The time for Wednesday's second annual Business Financial Resources Networking event is 5 p.m., not 5:30, and I did send a corrected email out. I apologize for the confusion, but it's noted in issues and updates it's starting at 5:30, but it is a drop-in lasting from 5 to 7. And it's on the ground floor of this building.
Very good. Anything else from council?
I would like to,
Councilwoman Price?
before we adjourn, we're losing a dear heart tonight. This is his last official meeting. He tried to make our previous meeting his last meeting, and we had to correct him. Or someone. Andre, okay, okay. But Dick is leaving us. This is his last official meeting with us, and Dick, it's been a pleasure to serve with you. We don't always agree 100% on council, but we know how to do it with civility and respect for each other. And certainly, I take pleasure in calling, even though you don't think I do, but referring to you as my colleague on council, and you'll be missed. You have served the public with passion, as I said to you early, and conviction, because you like to be and demonstrate that you're a good steward of the taxpayers' money. So thank you for your service.
Thank you for that, and I'll probably have some comments to say at the very short period of time I'll be at the next meeting. But I would like to take the liberty of recognizing a couple of my constituents who we have seen very, very frequently at our meeting. I wish we'd see more of them, but I want to comment on Jim and Mary Ann Archibald, both of whom have served on boards and commissions that I appointed them to. You know, they just come here to see what's going on in the city, and I wish we had more like them that would come and see what was going on to keep us honest. So thank you both, and I don't know whether you keep coming now that I'm not, but I'm glad you came.
He thinks you're coming just because of him.
That's right. But I wish we had more people that showed up. And I would say one other thing, that one of the proudest accomplishments, as far as I'm concerned, is televising these hearings, because it brings city government to the citizens. Gary Meadows does a great job, and televising that. So that's a very significant accomplishment in my book. So.
And I know last time I was giving you a farewell, and I took it all back. But
Well, I'm coming back next meeting, you know.
I need
You got another chance to do that.
I need you out there, give you a thumbs up, thumbs down, and then I'll go the opposite way. No, I'm kidding. No.
You've seen enough of me.
No, Councilman Duar, in all seriousness, you have made my coming on council very, very pleasant. Like Ms. Leslie said, we are able to agree to disagree in a very civil manner. That gives me the opportunity to respect your point of view and see your point of view, regardless of whether or not we agree. And we've had some great conversations, and I appreciated every single conversation, your guidance, and I wish you the best in retirement with Miss Mary Lou. So God bless.
I haven't had great success in retiring.
And I would just like to say, when I came on council, and Gary can attest to that, Dick's instructions to me was, okay, when I raise my hand, you raise your hand.
Didn't work, did it?
And
That's the same thing she told me.
And I had to tell him then, and Gary remembers it,
Wrong
Dick,
person.
I am not your puppet. Yeah, you told him I was not the one. But you know, I have enjoyed you so much. We always pull out our pictures of our grandchildren and talk about what they're doing.
Tell them that. We're supposed to be paying attention.
Before the meeting. And we always brag about our grandchildren. And yeah, we don't agree on everything, but I've got so much respect for you. And gonna miss you. I really, really am. Not gonna miss your cell phone going off. But I'm gonna miss you.
Well,
Thank you.
I really am.
Thank you.
Kay's got big shoes to fill.
Yes, she
I'd
does.
like to recognize
Kay,
Kay
congratulations.
Brolis with us. Congratulations, Kay.
Congratulations, Kay. Congratulations to the mayor and Gail.
Very good. Well, I know we'll have more fun with the comments and roasts, if you will, at our next meeting also. But
I'll be here.
Bimbo, you had one more thing to
I
say.
apologize. I do have one go back. We had highlighted in the Municipal Association's Uptown publication our City of Aiken's Explorer app. It was the focus of the article and brought good publicity to our app. And I would like to remind those of you that if you have a smartphone and are so inclined, either iPhone, Apple iPhone or a Droid, you can download it from either Google Play or the App Store under City of Aiken Explorer, and we're looking to add additional features to it to address things. It's a very fluid app that is getting more and more use. So we hope those of you that haven't downloaded it do. And that is all I have today, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Once again, we want to thank our veterans on this special day. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
From Gerardo, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Whitfield, thank you for your presence.
All those in favor, please stand up. We're adjourned.